We'll just introduce uh, our dean, no? Dean Jennifer Maria Samparo, to give us the opening remarks for ST Talks EASG 101 and Sustainability Studies in Higher Education Institutions.
Thank you very much, Prof. Klein. And thank you very much to my colleagues from the Department of Social Development Services, headed by Dr. Chris Malenab, and also the 112 faculty in charge. I'd like to recognize, of course, Vice Nathaniel Bantayan, our Vice Chancellor for Research and Extension, who will be joining us in a bit. I'd also like to recognize our guest speaker for today, one of our dear alumni, Miss Mirabel Per. And also to our dear students of UME 112, isang makaekolohiyang hapon po sa ating lahat. So this webinar is being organized and led by the Sustainability Science team, as mentioned by Doc Line, as we are on our second half of our semester. Actually, we've been introduced with the concept of sustainability in terms of some of the initial tools that we could use in terms of assessing the life cycle of certain commodity or services. And then we are going towards the discussion of the integrative methods. But now, what we will emphasize is basically do we then apply this sustainability goals and how does it play up with other institutions, like higher education institutions. I think some of or most of our examples, and you've been reading about it, is really focused on the industry and also in terms of external partners. No? But when we talk about sustainability, we want to emphasize that we should walk our talk. That is why one of our emphasis is to really develop our very own sustainability framework, not only in the university system, but also at UPLB and also the College of Human Ecology, being one of the institutions in the forefront of sustainability here in UPLB. The reason why we really invested on the SUSI, Sustainability and Social Impact Forum, is to really have that platform to discuss and co-design only with our internal stakeholders, but also with our external stakeholders, which is our alumni. And we're very thankful for the support of our UME 112 students who also joined the SUSI workshop last February 21. So today, we hope to hear from our dear colleagues from the industry and also from the university, and also the initiatives of the college in terms of contributing to sustainability research and in terms of forming that sustainability framework. No? So, kumbaga ba, how do we then operationalize sustainability in our day-to-day processes, day-to-day protocols, and systems? So with that, again, I'd like to congratulate everyone and welcome you to the STE Talks this afternoon. And thank you very much. Back to you, Doc Line.
Thank you, Dean Jenny, and really you can feel your leadership. You're always at the helm of steering the sustainability efforts of the college through the years. And with this particular effort that we have in ESG, we will finally concretize the framework we've been looking for, and perhaps a very unique platform and pioneering at that in the context of the Philippine higher education institution. Thank you so much. Now we move on with our guest speaker. He is a Vice Chancellor for Research and Extension. Please help me welcome Dr. Nathaniel Bantayan to give us the overview of the UPLB sustainability initiatives. Dr. Nell. Still trying to connect with the Vice Chancellor office. I think he was here already, but I'm not sure what happened.
Doc Line, let's move on first to the next speaker, if that's okay. VC Nell is now in Leyte, but he'll be here in a bit. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Dean. I think that still works. So I'm now turning you over to Dean Jenny Amparo to introduce our guest speaker and perhaps a proud graduate, a homegrown from the College of Human Ecology. Dean Jenny?
Thank you very much, Doc Line. So yeah, that's the merits and demerits of the Zoom, especially if we're doing it online and across the different regions. So later on, we'll welcome Vice Nell in our webinar. So we'll go on to our second speaker, which is very, very important as well. We have our dear and esteemed alumni, a sustainability leader and advocate for responsible business and climate action in the Philippines. She has served in senior sustainability roles within the Aboitiz Group, including as Assistant Vice President for Sustainability of Aboitiz Equity Venture, where she led initiatives on corporate sustainability, climate resilience, and stakeholder engagement. Right now, her work is really focusing on Sustainability PH, a nonprofit network that nurtures sustainability leaders and practitioners working towards a more sustainable Philippines. With extensive experience in sustainability strategy, partnerships, and environmental programs, she has worked with different agencies and communities and private sector organizations to advance climate resilience, biodiversity conservation, and inclusive development initiatives across the country. So today, we're very much honored to hear Ms. Mirabel May Perez, a BS Human Ecology graduate and a dear alumna and a dear friend. Ms. Mirabel, take it away. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So let me just pull up my small presentation. So we'll not belabor the topic on ESG because I know the foundations are already taught by our our esteemed professors here, Doc Klein, Doc Jen, ma'am. Actually, a lot of my learning, the foundations of learning on ESG sustainability came from my undergrad in human ecology. So this is a very good course to be a sustainability practitioner. Okay. Okay, share. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Ms. Mira, go ahead.
Let me just there. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about ESG trends, challenges, best practices across sectors, and I'll focus eventually on the role of HEIs in the whole ecosystem when it comes to discussing sustainability. So sustainability is really all about different systems working together towards that goal of a better quality of life, be it in our environment, in our businesses, in our communities. So the ESG buzzword when it comes to business becomes actually a framework or a language on how we are going to set our strategies in terms of sustainability. So in other businesses, they articulate it even further to EESG, including the topic on economic and financial growth. This also comes from the term ESG also comes from the buzzwords before of the triple bottom line approach, which is people, planet, profit. But now, in the business language, ESG is the most common term in terms of understanding risk management, reputation, and of course the longevity of an organization. So these are the three pillars. These are just some of the topics that describe these pillars. So when it comes to environment, we're talking all about climate mitigation, renewable energy, waste reduction. In terms of social sustainability, we're talking about community engagement, equity in terms of labor equity and labor practices, educational access, governance it's all about institutional transparency, accountability, and ethical leadership. So I'll just give you a brief context on ESG in the Philippines. So we all know that the Philippines is the most climate vulnerable, one of the most climate vulnerable countries. We have rapid urbanization and resource pressures, the growing demand for sustainable finance, and increasing expectations from global investors when it comes to our ESG reporting. So, in the Philippines, our ESG adoption comes into the policies that we are already implementing in the country. So, the Philippines developed the Philippine Sustainable Finance Roadmap with BSP. We also have our corporate sustainability reporting requirements with SEC, and then the ESG-linked investment flows. So the articulation of the Sustainable Finance Roadmap comes down into identifying ESG-linked investments. So the regulatory landscape over the years globally is expanding and growing to be more complex. So now the Philippines, for example, when we export to European countries, we can also be subjected to some of the sustainability requirements that those companies are implementing, which is actually pushed down by their own jurisdictional ESG policies, right? There's also that push for a comparative way of discussing ESG, thus the creation of the different sustainability reporting standards such as GRI, IFRS, S1, S2, sustainability reporting standards, TCFD, and the likes. And then there's also that push for ESG data credibility, and so there's actually a niche of different ESG rankings agencies that actually sorts of vouch the credibility of certain organizations when it comes to their ESG initiatives. So in terms of the trend within our neighboring countries, so there's also that growth for green and sustainable finance, expansion of renewable energy investments in the ASEAN region, the ESG monitoring in global supply chains, and in our neighboring countries, there's also that increase of sustainability disclosure requirements, ESG integration into education and research sectors. So these trends also affects industries and higher education institutions that supply ESG expertise and innovation. So I'll give you some of the sectoral trends. No, in me personally, I came in the energy sector. So energy transition is really central to any ESG adoption strategies and programs across organizations. So the key issues here is all about carbon emissions reduction, the renewable energy adoption, and of course, energy security for us to continue doing our business, no? And here in the Philippines, our renewable energy target is 50% by 2040. So it's really a long way to go for the country. So that's why there are also emerging policies on renewable energy to support this Philippine target. So the challenges is, of course, infrastructure investments in renewable energy because, of course, building renewable energy power plants is costly also. And of course, we have to balance the affordability and sustainability. So we're facing that energy trilemma in this sector, balancing the cost of renewable energy, environmental sustainability, and the cost of this energy transition to people as well. So in the banking and finance sector, so as I mentioned earlier, the sustainable finance framework is further articulated by the Sustainable Finance Taxonomy guidelines. I had an opportunity to actually be part of the development of this taxonomy guidelines for the Philippines together with BSP. So nowadays, bank plays a major role in the ESG transformation. So there are emerging ESG financial products that are available for businesses like green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, and ESG investment funds. And now the Philippines is with the taxonomy guidelines, there's that additional reporting for the banks to report on their different investments in this sector. So renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, climate resilience infrastructure, financial institutions also assess ESG risk in lending decisions. So when it comes to manufacturing and infrastructure, so this is actually an image of the semiconductor industry in the country. So today, the major export that we have as a country is of course our exports in the semiconductor business. So marami tayong factories niyan in Laguna, as you know. So the infrastructure industries face also growing ESG pressures. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, there is a global regulatory push also across the different supply chains from the global north. So even us here in the Philippines, we're also sort of have that sense of compliance in terms of this ESG pressures. So the major pressures in the manufacturing and infrastructure sectors is all about industrial emissions, resource consumption, waste management, and some of these ESG best practices are also now in place, like cleaner production technologies, circular economy practices, and sustainable building materials. So in terms of the trends in agriculture and forestry, so this is also economically critical and environmentally sensitive to us. So this actually is this image is actually a picture of in 2024 when we increased the budget for the agriculture sectors push for food and water security. So this drives also, this is driven also because of the key ESG concerns in this sector, no? Deforestation, biodiversity loss, water management, and farmer livelihoods. So there are emerging ESG practices around these sectors like climate resilient farming, or some also call it regenerative farming practices, sustainable land management, and agroforestry. So where does the higher education institutions come in this the whole gamut of ESG the ESG ecosystem, no? So the university really plays the crucial role in advancing ESG. Some of the universities becomes the hub, testing grounds from some of the novel ideas or innovation around sustainability. These are some of the key contributions of the HEIs. Some have sustainable campuses, renewable energy adoption, climate research. In terms of social, of course, the community development programs, inclusive education, social innovation research, and in governance, ethical institutional management, transparency in research funding. So I'll just show you some of the case studies here in the Philippines, no? So I'll go first with Ateneo, later si UP. So I had a chance to also work with Ateneo in some of their classes in sustainability. And Ateneo's key ESG initiative is actually to make Ateneo a living laboratory when it comes to their different sustainability initiatives, no? So they transition its campus to 100% renewable electricity supply as part of its commitment for 2030. So carbon neutrality by 2030 yung target ng Ateneo. They also have their sustainable campus programs like solar power installation across campus buildings, biodiversity action plans, and their support for electronic jeepney initiatives. And then they also have their ESG training programs and sustainability courses for professionals. So they integrate it in their operations, research, and education. For UP, of course, University of the Philippines is ranked the top ranked among the QS sustainability rankings, no, among Philippine campuses. And the university has really strong research in terms of climate science, environmental policy, and disaster risk reduction. And the work that the university did is actually on the policy research, supporting government climate strategies, development of sustainability innovations, community-based environmental programs. So UP really acts as a strong knowledge hub for sustainability governance in the Philippines. So with these use cases in terms of how higher education institutions also play, we know that, of course, we can establish these best practices by, of course, yun nga, as I mentioned earlier, in the use cases, there are ways to actually integrate sustainability, be it in institutional governance, dedicating sustainability offices in the universities, having ESG metrics in institutional strategy, campus operations, integration of renewable and energy in the campus, zero waste programs, and compliance to green building standards. In terms of academic integration, of course, sustainability curricula for students, ESG research centers, and industry partnerships. So these are some of the best practices that universities are now exploring and actually integrating in their own sustainability program. So this image is actually the Nanyang. I like this campus. I have the chance to actually visit this. Nanyang University in Singapore. They use kasi sustainable building design as part of their sustainability program in campus. So when you go inside, you really feel the passive cooling. So there's not, even though sobrang init din sa Singapore, so some of the areas in the university does not actually require the use of air condition because of the passive cooling design in this building. So there these are just some of the best practices in higher education. And I'd like to learn more and to discuss more about these ESG trends and challenges through our question and answers.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Mira. I think that you captured everything that you want to hear, ESG, and thank you so much. Like how you make the ESG relevant to higher education institution, even if the regulatory framework is still very much on corporations and including in particular the industry sector. And you want to hear also from UP soon. Uh, I just feel bad that LaSalle is not in the picture yet. Just
LaSalle,
kidding.
they have I'll actually include it perhaps for reading na lang of your
Uh,
students. But before I forgot, before I forget, so I'll just have a brief uh, introduction also of what we do in Sustainability PH. I forgot to click my my
sure,
presentation.
po.
So what we do in Sustainability PH, as Miss Jen mentioned, we're actually a nonprofit organization who's supporting sustainability practitioners who are already in the field, and we are also helping out professionals who wants to transition to careers in sustainability. So we have in Sustainability PH, we have this Learn to Lead Sustainability program, which is actually a 10-week immersive course. This is a capstone forward um, program wherein we have our learners, our leaders, emerging leaders to have ready applications of their capstone in their respective organizations. So we have this program. So if you are interested, we have also a Viber community and Sustainability PH. So yeah.
I think all of us are interested to enroll, and so expect a song of people and students who would want to know more about ESG.
Yes.
Thank you so much for really giving time and sparing a time for us. And perhaps I will open the virtual floor for Q&A since we have plenty of time for discussion. Who wants to shoot the first question? I hope you can stay for a little bit, Mamira, for the
Yes,
Q&A.
sure.
Okay, let's try to check the chat box. Anyone from the coordinators and also from the SDS faculty and staff who would want to at least want to clarify concepts? Yep. So perhaps that's the role of the facilitator to ask questions as well. Uh, just to like fill in the lull moment. I think they're still like processing all these ESG concepts. And I'm interested on the current development of the ESG regulatory framework. And I'm happy also to know that you are part of those who at least craft policy with the BSP. And I'm interested like how democratic participatory was the process in terms of crafting this regulatory policies since it will be implemented sooner. I think in 2026 for large scale operations or industries. And maybe in the next 3 years, they will also include the MSMEs. And of course, in ESG, cost will always be the key to everything. Like how would you really put in place all these ESG practices? Only corporations can do that, has the capacity, but how about the much smaller corporations
Yeah.
with
So
regard to
the
ESG?
so In terms of the SEC regulation on sustainability reporting and the expansion of the reporting requirements on sustainability. So essentially today we have what's in place is actually for those that are listed companies. So in 20, as you mentioned, in 2026, large corporations that are actually that fall under a 15 billion revenue cap is also included in the companies that are required to report even if they are not listed. So the participation of different stakeholders in the review of this um, policy is actually through the work also of the Philippine Sustainability Reporting Council, which is composed of different leaders in different industries as well. So what SEC is only covering is uh, the the business, no, the business sectors muna. There are no like for example, no regulatory requirements still for like educational institutions in terms of sustainability reporting or non-governmental institutions. So as is, different sectors who are not included in the SEC sustainability reporting requirements is at a voluntary basis. So I'm also I was also a sustainability reporter for my previous company, no, for Aboitiz. So a lot of this when we were doing sustainability reporting, voluntary siya talaga kasi there are also um requests from different stakeholders on our sustainability information. So we are when I was with Aboitiz, no, we were one of the first few companies that are doing sustainability reporting na even before the SEC regulation happened. So yeah, uh, in terms of like the Philippine sustainability, yung Philippine sustainable finance taxonomy naman. So since because the major implementers of the taxonomy guidelines are actually banks and other financial institutions, they are actually involved in the I mean there's a participatory approach in terms of um developing the policy. So yeah.
And perhaps ensuring that from the get-go that there's ownership also, no? But when you ask them to participate, and probably there's always an ownership in terms of, and also accountability in the
Accountability. Yeah.
implementation of the regulatory. I think you have the proudest teachers here in the room. I'll be perhaps calling Dean Jenny, and later on the question of Ma'am Carla. Dean Jenny.
Both are my professors.
They are the proudest.
Yes, we're the proudest of all who was here right now. Thank you, Doc Klein. I think like for example for ESG now the SEC requires all publicly listed institutions, right? Especially the industry to do their sustainability reports. That's already a requirement. Do you see that in the near future for even for public institutions and SUCs or universities and colleges that it's already being required by either CHED or whether it's DepEd or the national government? And what do you think is the benefit of it being a requirement for institutions like us? Thank you,
Yeah.
May.
I think, Ma'am Jen, in terms of the government implementation, so each departments are actually now being requested to have their own sustainability initiatives as well. So even, for example, in PEZA, they're also looking at how businesses in the PEZA zones can also be required with some level of sustainability reporting. And I see also that trend in terms, well, even in Singapore, for example, some of the reporting is also voluntary for universities. But I do think at some level there should be that identified standards for higher education institutions, because the language also of some of the sustainability reporting standards that are available now, like the S1, S2, is really directed to the IFRS. S1 and S2 is really directed to businesses and industries. So perhaps I think the most general sustainability reporting standards that the university can also look into is the GRI standards, because it's really the one that is widely used by different types of organization. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you. I think ito po ay Q&A at parang take back in time how you Jenny would ask question in her class. Okay. Another teacher would like to ask this question to you, Ma'am Mira. Ma'am Carla is asking, what are the challenges have you experienced working in the private sector in terms of engaging in ESG and sustainability in general? How could it succeed given the economic centeredness of our national and local policy?
Well, I think
Is
the major challenge, and I think the first hurdle that any business practitioner in sustainability is experiencing is really the buy-in, the governance. The first hurdle is to actually come about the governance part, understanding that the traditional way of doing business would not be equitable in the future. So we really, in my experience, I really started in understanding the business model and how the business model will evolve with the different sustainability strategies that we are really pushing forward. So yeah. So I think it's the institutional buy-in that has to happen first before anything else. So I think that's the first challenge.
okay. That's great. So I think those are the most pointed questions that were raised by our two notable professor here at the department. We will have another presentation, maybe, ma'am. You can stay later, perhaps after hearing Ma'am Mendoza's presentation. Okay lang po. Okay. Our next presenter is needs no further introduction. Professor Maria Emelinda Mendoza will talk about the ESG readiness and sectoral perspectives in UPLB. Ma'am Emmy is perhaps instrumental in introducing the course here in the college and perhaps in the university. Ma'am Emmy, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, Sir Klein, and thank you, Ma'am Mirabel. We are truly excited to have heard from you and hear from you, more, as we engage. So, the task that I was given today by my colleagues, is on sectors, um, so my presentation will really focus on what ESG readiness is all about, why it matters to HEIs, and then go a little bit to what we have discovered in some of the semesters that we have engaged our Hume 112 students to deep dive a little on the ESG preparedness of UPLB, and then some thoughts on ways forward for ESG. readiness. So, what is ESG, and what is its origin, no? Where did it come from? So basically, when we say ESG, and I'm glad that Ma'am Mirabel had looked into this matter, no? ESG stands for environment, economic, social, and governance dimensions of sustainability. And in the context of higher education institutions such as UPLB, ESG readiness would basically refer to our institution's capacity to integrate sustainability principles into our operation, into our governance, our research, our teaching, as well as in our community engagement. So, why EESG when we have been talking about ESG? So the concept of ESG evolved from the earlier version of the ESG framework used in sustainability and responsible investment. The addition of the economics, because the ESG refers to environment, social, and governance dimensions, and the addition of the economic part. I'm not so sure if it's really the addition or going back, no, a little bit into the economic part reflects a growing recognition that if we're going to talk about long-term sustainability, it must explicitly consider economic value creation as well as resilience, not only environmental and social responsibility. So, if we go to the earlier roots of EESG as well as ESG, maybe we can say that this really gained traction from the 1950s onwards, because the 1950s was a build period after the damages of the Second World War. But before people heard about ESG, no, discussions about business responsibility were framed as more corporate social responsibility. So there have been key developments along that line, but eventually it became CSR was basically criticized for being philanthropic and voluntary, and would lack measurable standards. So by 1987, because of some of the things that happened, or some of the milestones like the Brundtland Report that we usually try to take on and inform the class, no, where it defined sustainable development as meeting the needs of the current, of the present, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, no. So this idea became influential in government policies, no, as well as corporate sustainability practices. But sustainable development is not the same as sustainability, and that would be clarified more maybe, no, as we go along in our classes in sustainability science. Okay, so but the birth of ESG, no, maybe around circa 2000s, no, it became more widely recognized globally speaking through the UN Global Compact report, no, entitled "Who Cares Wins." Okay, so this report basically argued that environmental, social, and governance factors should be integrated into financial markets and investment decisions. So, of course, there were key institutional developments. No, there are a lot of happening that really fed, no, into this recognition. So, the UNPRI, no, the Principles for Responsible Investment, was launched around the 2006, I guess, the time that I transferred to the College of Human Ecology from CAS. And investors began using ESG criteria to evaluate business risks, business ethics, no, and long-term business performance. And so ESG became widely adopted in many sustainability reporting frameworks, including the Global Reporting Initiative, no, or the GRI. So eventually, around this time, ESG became the dominant framework in sustainable finance, no, and corporate reporting. Okay, by the 2010, no, by 2010, ESG has moved from voluntary concept to a more global governance framework. Sabi nga ni Ma'am Mirabel, they were one of the few, no, in the Philippines at least, no, to have started to do sustainability reporting even before it became a compliance thing. So it was voluntary at the onset, and but eventually it moved to a more compliance framework. And of course, it gained traction more and more because of what happened from the MDGs to the SDGs. Now, in 2015, we had the UN SDGs. There was also, of course, the ratification of the Paris Climate Agreement, no, and more growth into the ESG investment funds, no. So that basically move, no, ESG forward into a more compliance framework, no, regulatory, in other words, no. But by the 1920s, some institutions and regulators have expanded ESG to EESG, adding an explicit economic pillar. So why add the economic pillar? The critics of ESG argued that ESG focused heavily on environment and social compliance, but many times tend to neglect now the economic part of sustainability. So they contended that sustainability must also include economic resilience. It should include value creation and more long-term viability for the organization. So if we go back to our question of what we want to sustain, no, and what we need to sustain, and how are we going to sustain this, no, I think aside from, you know, our passion for the environment, apart from our passion for the communities that we serve, we cannot serve and we cannot do things about the environment if we are not able to sustain our own organization. So we are also in the business, no, of ensuring that we sustain, we strengthen human organizations and social institutions. So basically, the contention is there must be a balance between among business, the business players, no, a balance between profitability, sustainability, and governance. So the contention is that EESG, in EESG, economic performance is not separate, no, but is part of sustainability. No, in the Philippine context, na-mention na ni Ms. Mirabel, yung mga regulators, no, one would be the BSP, no, especially for banks, no, and financial institutions, and also the Securities and Exchange Commission. They have adopted frameworks that highlight EESG disclosures, no. So these frameworks encourage organization to identify what is material to them and to report and to disclose what would be their economic impacts, what are their actions in terms of environmental stewardship, how do they do social responsibility, and what are their governance practices. So we see here, no, in the table that I tried to put in everything, that ESG focuses on non-financial risks and responsibilities. On the other hand, EESG integrates economic sustainability and value creation with environment, social, and governance responsibilities. Well, this is not an econ class, no, but just to clarify a little, economics is more than just looking at the financial figures, no, and books. It's really a question of how do we create value. Okay, if we're going to talk about our social initiatives and we don't want to do away with our social responsibility, how would this interventions, these projects, these programs that we are into, how can they really create value, no, for our organization? So in essence, the evolution from ESG to EESG reflects a shift, no, not really a big paradigm shift, no, but a shift nevertheless, no, from focusing mainly on environment, social, and governance towards a more holistic sustainability framework, no, about risks, no, that now integrate economic resilience, no, of organizations with environmental stewardship, social responsibility, and ethical governance. Okay, so with that, what is EESG readiness then? Okay, so here I wrote down EESG readiness as referring to the degree to which any institution is prepared to implement, monitor, and support sustainability practices across the four intersecting pillars. No, in the context of higher education institutions, EESG readiness rather would refer to our capacity to integrate those sustainability principles in our operations. No, so this will include, among others, looking into our institutional policies, our academic programs, our campus operations, our research agenda, our community partnerships, and our reporting and accountability systems. No, so long and short of it, it looks into our governance and operations, no, our administrative systems, and then our research and instruction, as well as our extension and public service, because we're talking here of our impact also on our partner communities. Okay, so let's deep dive a little, but not so much, because we will not finish within the hour, no, in looking at some of these indicators or some of the things that we need to look into when we're talking about these different dimensions. So when we talk about economic dimension, basically the focus is on financial sustainability as well as, no, economic impact. So it, of course, has to prove that an organization does efficient use of their financial resources, that they should be transparent in funding as well as in investment. What is the role? What is their role, no, in local and national economic development, as well as what would be the cost benefits, no, of their sustainability initiatives, no, whether these initiatives run in the social as well as the environmental dimensions. Okay, so indicators would probably involve sustainable procurement. So in the case of the university, we have to look into our procurement systems, our financial transparency, investment is not so much in terms of financial part in the case of an HEI, which is a national as well as a public university, but we invest on the future of our students. So if we are able to capture that and put value on that to sustain our environment, make our university continuously relevant to the life of the nation, then are in business. No, of course, our support for local economic development. Probably this would not just be our curriculum, not just in producing graduates, but also the kind of research that we do and the kind of public service that we get ourselves involved in. And then innovation and research commercialization would be part of that. Okay, for environmental dimension, this would perhaps focus on our ecological responsibility. So how is our campus practices in terms of our energy utilization, waste management, and water conservation? These are usually the matrices that are looked into. Of course, our carbon footprint reduction and this has been more or less covered by a lot of the indicators from GRI, and even in the IFRS now that they're trying to navigate with their S1, S2 disclosures. There's a lot more focus on climate change, so carbon footprint. So ang problem lang dito ay baka may makalimutan tayong iba, like biodiversity and all. So this will also include sustainable campus infrastructure. So are we getting into greener buildings? Of course, kailangan ko isama yung biodiversity protection and conservation, and then curriculum integration of environmental topics. So it's like for human ecology students and for those taking up courses in human ecology, parang hindi na to pinag-uusapan, given na siya, but if you're not conscious of it, some of our colleagues, some of our students might lose the opportunity to also look into environmental dimensions of our sustainability as a university if we do not deliberately and intentionally integrate them into our curricular programs. Okay, so the social dimension will probably include human well-being and societal contributions. So this will include indices, metrics about diversity, equity, inclusion. How inclusive is our education? Are we really serving our purpose as a national university by ensuring that across different economic classes we are reaching them, and also geographical diversities? Are we reaching, for instance, our GIDAs? And how do we ensure that we will also have students from these geographical and disadvantaged areas? The diversity among our major stakeholders. So first, we have to be clear about who our major stakeholders are. We are not a business organization with investors. Our investors are the Filipino people with their taxes. But we hold our students as our major stakeholders. Of course, we have our employees, our faculty, our reps, and our administrative staff. But lest we forget our communities, our partner communities, our learning communities, are also part of our stakeholders, as well as our alumni. And I'm really, really so happy when I saw Ma'am Mirabel in our SUSI workshop, because is Che's uh, being serious, no, about hearing the voices, no, of our alumni, no, uh, with regards to sustainability. Then justice in terms of access, opportunities, resources, and benefits. And this, of course, will include, no, in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion, gender inclusion. Of course, student welfare and personnel well-being, as well as community engagement and public service, as well as our extension programs. Do we have ethical recruitments and partnership systems? No, are we keen about human rights and labor practices? No, so do we have all of this written? So walang iwanan at walang limutan, no, para hindi siya dependent lang on who's really the leader, no, but it goes generational. So, and then of course the governance dimension, focusing on leadership, ethics, and accountability. Okay, ethical leadership and decision making, transparency in our reports, institutional policies. Do we have a voice in governance and data protection and risk management, for that matter? Okay, so these are just some of what literature has for us, no, in terms of these EESG, no, these dimensions, no, and how they crisscross one another. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but if you look at our SDGs, the UN SDGs, no, we also see, no, the same framework, no, yung ESG or EESG is also part of the SDG framework, no. So some of our SDGs, ano ba nakalagay dyan? SDG 6, 7, 12, 13, 14, 15 are really, no, cross-cutting, but very, very obvious environmental dimensions, no. Of course, the social, and there's the governance part. Okay, so let me go right away to why ESG matters to the university. And again, I'm glad that Ma'am Mirabel touched on this earlier, no. So basically, the university is a special animal, special organization, because especially UP Los Baños, it's not really profit oriented. We are intentional in looking at our organization as responsible thought leaders and educators, no. Of course, ESG matters to the university because we often have a large institutional footprint, no, economic and environmental. UPLB, for instance, no, its footprint, its carbon footprint, no, its energy uptake is really it's to reduce, no, the intent is to reduce our energy use, no, and consumption, because that's the biggest, no, contributor to our ecological footprint, no. Now EESG matters also to the university because of funding implications as well as reputation, especially when you are a private HEI. But for UPLB, ano pa rin siya, funding implications are still important because we don't want DBM and the national government cutting our funds, no. And basically, HEIs are important actors, no. That's why ESG matters to the university, because they're in the business of producing knowledge, shaping values, no, and influencing the future leaders of our local community. Okay, so so it matters to the university, and what would be the benefit of using an ESG framework, no, and start thinking about navigating our sustainability and perhaps documenting it in some kind of sustainability report. No, so benefit number one, it hopes to improve our institutional reputation, and this is what we refer to as value creation. No, the things that we do under ESG and in the name of sustainability, if we are able to create that in terms of value, then it supposedly improves our institutional reputation. And then attraction of values-driven students and staff. Now, when we say institutional reputation, we just do not want that other people would look the university highly, but really what we want is also to attract stakeholders, students, as well as personnel, who wants to be in the university because of certain values that align with them. Okay. And of course, long financial and operational resilience. What will happen, for instance, if they keep on cutting our budget? Do we rally? Yes, we rally, but what if they don't listen to us? Will we die, as an organization, or do we innovate so that we will continue serving, and doing our mandate? And of course, aligning with global frameworks such as the SDGs, we have accreditations like the AUN, so alignments are meant to create value that will increase our significance, our impact, and our profit, if we are into the profit business, not UPLB though, So let me go to what we have done so far, in terms of looking into whether or not UPLB is ESG ready. If you're going to do a sustainability report and use an ESG framework to do that, how will we fare? Okay, so we did very rough study with our Hume 112 students as early as 2023 or 2024, and these are some of the things that we found. They're not really conclusive at that point that we did the study because it was very rough, and there was no prior leveling off of the terms that we have been using when we went down and talked with and engaged the different colleges. So siguro kaya complete yung sa economic component sa check kasi alam natin yung pinag-uusapan natin, but if you see that some are not green at all, like CFNR and CPAF and CVM, it does not really mean that they're not prepared economically. In fact, maybe they're able to invite more resources, more donations, but if we look into the records, if we look at what is available to somebody looking into the economic sustainability of these colleges, hindi ka agad nakikita, hindi ka agad mabibigay, hahanapin pa, hahagilapin pa, So this one is on the environmental component, and again we see that the readiness part is partial or absent for some of the colleges for one reason or another. But basically, it's not that there are no initiatives, but that there might be some improvements needed in terms of documentation, and systems. This one is for the social component, and this one is for governance. So technically what we did was to look into indicators of EESG, but the limitation there is that most of the indicators were more aligned for profit-oriented organizations because they're the ones who are uh, uh, more intentional about their sustainability reporting and documentation. So one of the main learnings that we have, no, with this exercise is really because of the unique character of UPLB as an HEI, we do need to come up with better indicator system if you're going to do measure our readiness through these indicators. So let me go and read what has been here written as part of our report, no, regarding the readiness study that we initiated. So at the time, no, we saw that the university was by looks and purposes at the result, no, was not really very ready to engage in sustainability reporting using an ESG framework. At that time, hindi nga alam ng mga tao na tinatanong namin sa iba-ibang colleges, ano yung ESG? Yung iba, worse, ano yung sustainability? No? So this deficiency is primarily due to some factors, including these factors. One is the absence of an overarching policy or formal statement that articulates the institution's commitment to sustainability and providing a framework for reporting. So at that time, medyo hindi pa na nasasabi sa baba, no, kung ano yung meron ba tayong initiative, etc. Meron, no, just to make that clear, but reporting and communicating is another thing. Okay. Another factor is the absence of a specialized office or unit to oversee a systematic collection, the processing, the management of relevant data. I'm sure si Ma'am Mirabel will this resonates with them because this is also very, very important when they do sustainability reporting in the private sector. At hindi mo magagawa yung magkakaroon ka ng ganyang office kung wala kang buy-in, no, noong top management, no, but you do need a repository of important data and information, and efficient siya para madaling halukayin yung kailangan na information. So at the time that we started the study, wala pa tayong UPLB sustainability program, but now we have the sustainability program, which eventually we're hoping to develop into an office. But right now, what is really very helpful is our quality assurance office, as well as the improvements in the systems of both our office for academic affairs as well as our research and extension. Okay. Also, our internal and external stakeholders, including our faculty, our staff, our students, and community partners, basically that we level off and we are on the same plane. No, we are educated on the principles and importance of ESG and sustainability reporting to ensure informed participation and support. Okay, so now let me say a little about the ways forward after we did that study, and we said, teka, we really need to develop our indicator system, and to do that, we wanted to hear it also from our stakeholders. No, so we said, let's engage our students, let's engage our reps, our faculty, our communities, as well as our alumni, no? Kaya nagkaroon po tayo ng SUSI, part po yon, hindi pa kasama dito yung result noon, no? But this one came from the students. Okay, so some of the concerns that we can think about, some of the thoughts and ideas that came out of our FGDs with students from different colleges will include the following, but this is just very brief, just to see this through, no? So from the students, when we say economic domain, basically they were concerned about the tangible effects of the usual reduced fundings when there are reduction in our fund from the national government, and it affecting their academic experiences. Like, for instance, they become the recipient part of deteriorating state of our laboratory equipment and facilities, no? The university should consider economic circumstances also, they said, to ensure that opportunities are extended to those who are most in need. So this is also an equity issue. Now, for the environmental domain, ito marami silang nasasabi. Sabi nila, pag sinabi nating EESG at environment ang pinag-usapan, this will we need to develop indicators and measures, no, that looks into our waste management, air pollution from even the vehicles, no, not just our operations inside our buildings, no, energy inefficiencies, water wastage, no, and even the deforestation, or some of them, I think this would be coming from a lot of the voices from CFNR, environmental issues, no? And then they said that low awareness on initiatives like waste management and tree planting that are led, no? There are initiatives, that's just to clarify, but low awareness, no, among UPLB constituents as well as student organization. Still on environment would be monitoring that is perceived as sporadic, no, and there are surveys, possible audits, no, but there are they do not perceive clear systems, no, along this line for MNE. And then the view of sustainability as preserving UPLB's natural environment through reduction of waste, energy, and then for ecosystem protection. I guess some of them are saying that where is the social in and the social impact, no? Maybe we should also think deeper, no, into coming up with indicators for those, no? So social system, no, for the social domain rather, students were very keen about mentioning that they're not just here for the content part of what we're teaching them, but also empathy and shared responsibility, that how we see it, no, when how do we respond to mental health strains, as well as because there are institutional gaps along that line. Help and assistance, they say yes, there are initiatives, but to access these services is another issue. Okay, community inclusion and the limits of participation. This is for students, no? I was reading into the reports, and community inclusion and limits of participation refer to students. How can they really feel they're part of what's going on in terms of sustainability, especially if they do not have organizations, no? They're not part of any social student organization. And then learning spaces and environmental limitations. For governance, no, there's this perception that the sustainability program implementation is rather poorly done at that time. Okay, and there are anecdotal tawag nito, quotes here. Okay, limited student input in decision making regarding sustainability. Okay, and yeah. Now, so given that, what would be our challenges and considerations? So also based from the voices of the students would be the perceived resource constraints, no, balancing our short-term goals with our long-term sustainability goals, as well as maybe a perceived resistance to change also among and especially when you want innovative systems put in place, and certain offices or personnel, no, really are keen on maintaining, no, way things are, and business as usual scenarios. Okay, so in terms of ways forward, if we want to move on and do something about our sustainability reporting in the university, number one in the list is having a clear UPLB sustainability framework. At least in the College of Human Ecology and the College of Development Communication, I think this is very much, no, an intentional thing coming up with our sustainability framework, as well as other colleges, but to put everything together so that, we can be one voice, no, in UPLB is another thing. Okay, there is top administration buy-in about sustainability, because there's now a growing appreciation, no, of what it can do reputationally, in terms of risk, etc. No, but we want to sustain that top administration buy-in, and then, as I've mentioned earlier, the need for indicators to look into our sustainability performance, no, using EESG. For indicators that fit, no, UPLB as a public and national university, because existing indicators might not be applicable to the character of our HEI. And then embedding EESG into our curriculum, our research, our extension and administration, transparency in our reports and benchmarking, ensuring stakeholder engagement and voices in whatever sustainability planning, no, that we will go through. And of course, last but not the least, is communicating and engaging our stakeholders for sustainability. Okay? So this is a call for action, especially for our Hume 112 students, no. How is your HEI addressing our ESG today? Okay, and maybe in terms of acting, for ourselves, identify areas where we can also contribute, no, and the challenge, no, of collaborating, engaging with our peers, engaging with each other, engaging with UPLB, the UPLB communities and their partner communities, no, and our partner organizations from the business sector, from government, and as well as NGOs, no, to make sure that if we're going to talk sustainability, we hear the voices of everyone, and put them, no, into a framework that's going to be um, acceptable, no, and ownable, no, for us, no, because sustainability, as we always say, really needs transparency, and needs working together. This is one area of our what we are doing that we cannot do alone. And so, to be able to work together, we also need certain value systems. We need patience with one another, because we're not all in the same level. So patience, the tolerance also, and the humility, no, to ensure that we do not just speak but also listen to each other. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Ma'am Emmy Mendoza. I heard it from the expert. And perhaps, no, to cap the day this is the perfect time for you to ask Ma'am Emmy, no, to ask questions with regard to the sustainability efforts of the university. But before we go on with that, I think we want to hear the message of Vice Chancellor Nell with regard to the overarching sustainability uh, effort of UPL. Maybe can we?
Thank you, Doc Line. We'll share the message, the video message of VC Nell. VC Nell is in the Helms workshop in Leighton right now, together with the other vice chancellors. We'll share with you his presentation, recorded presentation as well, about the sustainability initiatives of UP Los Baños. So let me quickly share my screen. Okay. Okay.
Sound.
EST 101 and the ST ETO. Thanks to Dean Jenny for the invitation. What I'll be talking about is the current initiatives of UPLB as far as ensuring the sustainability of the campus in all its aspects. And with that, I mean the operations of the university, the academic programs, its engagement with the communities, but more specifically on the research that the UPLB does. Okay, so I'll talk about the UPLB sustainability program, the framework that we use, and the newest leveling up of the research agenda of UPLB, we call the Agora 2.0, and the way forward. Now, I have to say that UPLB was established with sustainability in mind. Remember that the two foundations that were established in the early 1900s. One, the College of Agriculture. Second, the School of Forestry. These institutions of learning were essentially designed with sustainability in mind, of course, food security as far as agriculture is concerned, and forestry to ensure the sustainability of the forest. And during that time, of course, forestry as an industry, and until the 1960s and 70s in the Philippines, was very, very productive. Until we shifted towards conservation. Okay. In the UP system, there are strict focus SDGs, but for UPLB, it appears, and because of the nature of the programs and activities that we do, we address all of them. Not in the same, set of activities that we need to do, but for UPLB, it's really on addressing zero hunger, followed by future communities, followed by well-being, and also, if you look closely, on responsible consumption. But essentially, all the projects that we do in UPLB address all the SDGs. Okay. Now, it was also important that we set up a program to address sustainability in a more organized way, if I may call it. And this was steered by the recent partnerships that we've been doing with the Canadian government. In particular, the establishment of the Philippines Carrying Network for Sustainability. And this happened sometime in 2024. late 2024 September, when the ambassador of Canada to the Philippines, Mr. David Hartman, visited UPLB to open the PCNS office. And of course, PCNS is a group of almost 80 already Filipino higher education institutions in the country, but also almost 20 Canadian institutions of learning in Canada, of course. Okay, and we invited them. We invited them to give us a training on developing a sustainability mindset for executive leaders sometime in 2024, October 16 to 18. And we invited colleagues from the University of Victoria to give us a workshop. And the executive committee, more than 30 of them, attended the 2.5-day training. And after that, the chancellor moved to issuing an administrative order constituting a UPLB committee on sustainability. And soon after, we met. It was the first meeting of the UPLB Sustainability Committee, spearheaded by the Office of Vice Chancellor Research and Extension. And that also was incidentally in parallel to the UP system committee in SDG. And that was very timely because the secretariat of the UPLB Sustainability Committee became the members of the UP system committee on SDG. Okay, so what's the framework that we use? To generate the framework or even the map of the UPLB Sustainability Initiative, it was important for the UPLB Sustainability Committee to meet and have a workshop, and we did that on 11 November 2025. It took us about a year, to set up different programs, but it was important to meet with the members of the committee from all the colleges and centers around the campus to craft this roadmap. And the roadmap was guided by the UPLB framework in terms of the academic programs, university operations, in terms of the research of innovation that we do, and of course, in terms of the community engagement. Essentially, it was a whole of institution approach. Okay, so for strengthening academic programs, we are looking at curriculum integration and expansion. We will continue to embed ESD, Education Sustainable Development Principles, across all academic disciplines. We also think about offering micro-credentials and transnational higher education focused on sustainability. We will have specialized program development and experiential learning. Next, on advancing research and innovation, of course, we are guided by UPLB Agora, our branded research and extension agenda. It will focus on demand-driven research. Okay, so we will continue to drive the Agora framework as a marketplace for pioneering innovation, ensuring research is demand-driven and addresses pressing issues around the country or even in the region. SDG alignment and impact measurement. Systematically plan on research and extension initiatives of the corresponding SDGs. Interdisciplinary collaboration. As you all know, we have at least 14 interdisciplinary studies centers, in particular, the Life Cycle Assessment Laboratory and the Integrated Natural Resources Environment Management, or INREM, tackling specifically sustainability issues. We also address knowledge translation, commercialization in particular, intensify efforts to translate research findings into actionable solutions, policies, and patentable. That's very important, patentable technology. Next is deepening community engagement, that is strengthening the town and DAO model, national capacity building, that is expand the reach of programs like what the Office for Social Development for Higher Education, the OIDE, does in the higher education leadership mentoring. In fact, as we speak, I am now in Southern Leyte State University, where we are doing a helm session. International collaborations, people-centered approach, and targeted outreach. And lastly, enhance the sustainable university operations. Okay. This is very important, and this is where the green model for the university is going to happen. And when I say green, we will ensure that our program on putting up, for instance, a solar inside the campus. As you know, we are using up 3.5 megawatts of power, and this will be assured when that solar farm will be installed in the university that will produce up to 5 megawatts of power. Okay. But I would like to mention that the entrepreneur university model will be fast-tracked through the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Innovation and Enterprise Management. We will fully leverage this EUF to systematize income generation, ensure financial resilience, and enable sustained investment in our sustainability initiatives. We will work on our carbon neutrality and renewable energy transition, as I mentioned earlier, our UN Waste to Zero campaign, and target net zero carbon emissions by 2050. That's the roadmap that we are proposing for UPLB. Digital transformation and resource efficiency. We will continue the digitalization of workflows and services to reduce waste and improve efficiency, implement comprehensive waste management innovations, and promote resource efficiency across all university operations. And lastly, impose or implement fiscal diligence and sustainable procurement. What does that mean? We will maintain transparent budget management and integrate sustainability criteria into procurement processes, ensuring that university expenditures align with environmental and social responsibility. And in terms of fiscal diligence, UPLB is very unique in a way that there is a specific committee, we call it the liquidation committee. It's composed of the Vice Chancellor for administration and the Vice Chancellor for research and extension, working together very closely to ensure that all the funds that we receive through our research are used diligently, and that we close out, we finish all our projects in time. So, our UPLB sustainability framework is really a whole new institution. We will tag and measure all our academic programs and make sure that they are compliant or addressing specific SDGs. Our university operations will move towards green mobility and green infrastructure. Our research innovation, will be addressing all the issues that are very important, that are really needed on the ground by our stakeholders, specifically the fisher folk. and the farmers. But more importantly, the university will be an active citizen in the community where we are, specifically Los Baños. And of course, in the neighboring towns of um, Bay, the city of Talamba, and around, of course, around Mount Makiling, including Santo Tomas. So this is the UPLB sustainability framework. And I'd like to announce that last Friday, UPLB launched the next level of the UPLB Agora, which we call the Agora 2.0. And with that, leveling up, we are moving towards tangible impact through our sustainability initiatives. This is a very short presentation. It's an orientation, a brief explanation of the sustainability initiatives of UPLB that at this point is being spearheaded by the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Extension. Again, we are open for questions through DingGen, come to us, visit the website, and learn more about what we are doing together with our colleagues in the campus, in particular, the College of Human Ecology. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Nel Bantayan, for that comprehensive explanation. Perhaps very exciting to see that we're heading towards concrete sustainability actions for the university. Now I'm opening the virtual floor for the Q&A. Maybe Professor Mendoza, Ma'am Mirabel Perez, and D. Jenny, and perhaps address those questions coming from the audience. Lauren. Or at least a reflection perhaps from our discussants, hearing the direction of the university as well as the local and global context of ESG. So I don't see any from the chat box. Perhaps our discussants were effective and perhaps succeeded in sending the message across our audience that we understood it well. So maybe perhaps, yes, Dean Jenny, maybe you have some final words or at least a synthesis.
Actually, quick ano lang siguro with our speakers. So I'd like to thank our dear speakers. Just a quick question because we just had recently a memo from our president and also from a joint memo from OVPAA and OVPA regarding the impacts of what is happening with the geopolitical situation happening in the Middle East. And now the main contention is really on energy conservation. This afternoon we had a consultation with the different units, and then one of the major comments is, I think it's more of a question whether we're doing the energy conservation to support what is happening with the geopolitical scene, or are we doing it really for whether there is something happening in the world, or we're still gonna do it anyway. So I think that there was some discussion on that. So would you like to maybe your 5 cents on that, especially that's a very on time and very hot topic today. So yeah, and its relation to sustainability. So thank you.
Dean Jenny, perhaps Mamira,
Yeah.
would you like to share your thoughts?
Wars or without wars, energy conservation is a must. I mean, coming from the energy sector, I always, and it's actually not just energy conservation, but looking at innovations on energy efficiencies. So, and I don't think the what's happening with the geopolitical chaos that's happening on the other side of the world can actually impact the need for us, the imperative for us to do this also in the country. Kasi our energy prices even in the ASEAN region, tayo pinakamataas. So, economically, I mean, it would make economic sense if institutions can be energy efficient and also has energy conservation policies in place within their organizations. Yeah. And by the way, Prof ko din po pala si Prof. Emmy here. As always, you have the clearest way of discussing things.
Teacher to 100,000 students, perhaps, spanning 40 years. Yeah, thank you, Mamira. The war is, I think, something that we didn't see it coming. But for myself, no, I'm very also worried about the rising cost of cat food and litter sand with regard to the war. Wait, who else? Maybe you can entertain one last question from the crowd before we go for the synthesis and awarding of certificates. So while you're thinking of your question, we're also sending in the chat box the link for the attendance sheet and evaluation. Yes, Lawrence, you're
Hello po.
recognized.
Hello po. Ayun po, given the situation nga po na minention kanina, may I ask po pala, hindi po ba ang paggamit po ng electricity in our homes ay siya rin pong siya rin pong nagko-consume ng nagko-consume ng gasolina po na ayun nga po pinipigilan po natin na ma-deplete sa bahay natin. Hindi po ba parang ang band-aid solution na ginagawang 4 days work a week? Kung ang mangyayari naman po ay magiging work from home ito and mas makakapag-consume pa po tayo ng electricity na nag-i-equal naman din po dun sa nako-consume po natin na gasoline by transportation or commuting during or compared po dun sa 5 days per week natin na sistema. Ano po kaya yung pwede nating maging alternative ways rather than providing our society here in the Philippines dun sa 4 days a week? Thank you po. Yun lang po yung question ko.
Thank you, Lawrence. I'm afraid that can I address that question, but maybe Dean Jenny or Ma'am Emmy or anyone? Yes, Ma'am Emmy Mendoza.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And this is related also to the question that Ma'am Mirabel answered earlier, no? So, doon sa question ni Ma'am Jen. When you say Band-Aid solution, I think for me, we should think that we are all in this together. So, the 4-day work week, it's not actually a 4-day work week. We're also working. We're also going to hold our classes in blended ways, no? It's really no, ano yun, Ma'am Jen? No site, no going to the site, no? No going to the workplace day, no? But it does not mean to say that our work stops, no? I believe it's really a reaction, no, to what is happening. And it does not compensate, Lawrence, doing a 4-day work week does not compensate for the contribution of our households, no, to the energy that is consumed in the Philippines and in the world for that matter. So I say that we are all in this together. So the university, the government for that matter in general, kasi it started with an EO from the president and now we have administrative order within the university to support that. We're doing it from our end, no, from our institutions and the governments, and to think about ways and means, no, to reduce our energy consumption because ganito tayo sabi nga ni Ma'am Mirabel, whether there's a war or not, dapat pinag-iisipan natin. But many times we are also confronted with the reality that we only begin to react, no, when we are in that precipice, no, when we are in that tipping point, no, when we are threatened, our very survival is threatened. So I guess, Lawrence, my answer to that is then in our homes we can also think of ways, no, to also contribute to this energy saving regime, no, that we are starting with right now, and hopefully it becomes a habit. Hopefully we're able to adjust and innovate, no, well, no, as a way forward from from this period, no, in our existence, no. Yeah, so let's do things all together. Let's think in our companies, let's think in our organization, let's think in our households. Let's also think about ourselves, no, individually. Ganda kasi ng human echo from individual to to the global community. So siguro lahat tayo ay magkakasama dito sa hindi lang yung pag-a-adjust, pero yung pagmo-move forward kung ano yung mga pwede nating gawin, no, to save energy.
Yeah, thank you. There's also some comments in the chat box, also like really pushing UP to embrace sustainability, just like Ateneo mentioned here. And also, if there are also a sort of funding support from the administration to realize the sustainable efforts that we are pushing or currently at least have in mind. But anyway, sustainability is something that never ends, and perhaps we would just gather all your questions in the chat box. There's also an evaluation form by which you can also write down since it's almost 6 p.m. And probably it's the best time to transition to the awarding of the certificate of appreciation. Okay, Maeve, and we put up our certificate of appreciation. Just waiting. While waiting, please answer. We are putting in the link for the evaluation that will also serve as your attendance. Okay, so we are awarding the certificate of appreciation to Ms. Mirabel May Perez for serving as a resource person for UMI 112 for sustainability science during the STE talks entitled ESG 101 and the sustainability in higher education institutions, organized by the Department of Social Development Services, College of Human Ecology, given this day on the 9th of March, 2026. Signed by our department chair, Maria Carisma Timalenab. Thank you so much, Ms. Mirabel. Please accept our warmest appreciation for really taking time, and also for being engaging with the questions from our crowd. I think you just inspired thousands or maybe hundreds of our students to take a career in sustainability. And how human ecology is so relevant in today's challenges and be part of the solution. Again, thank you. And we are moving to our next resource speaking to uh, our resident sustainability uh, scholar, perhaps, Professor Maria Emelina Mendoza. Thank you, Ma'am Emmy, for never failing us to embrace sustainability, going through the thick of it, the technicalities and everything. And also to Vice Chancellor Nathaniel Bantayan for steering the sustainability efforts of the university and giving us a hope, a flicker of hope at that our sustainability efforts will not go down to the drain, but it is actually in action. And one day we will realize that sustainability can happen. Okay, before we move to the closing remarks of our department chair, I would like to synthesize what we got for this afternoon. I think we started with the global and the national context of ESG that really set the tone on why we have to at least adopt ESG standards. Although perhaps it is applicable in industry, we also have VC Nel Bantayan, who gave us the overarching framework of the university. And that discussion was further deepened by Professor Mendoza and relayed to us the effort of UME 112 Sustainability Cluster in putting together and shaping the sustainable framework of the university. And we also entertain questions, and that also gives a lot of some enlightenment of some marshy issues with regard to sustainability at ESG. Okay, I think we really covered the all of the things that we need to cover. Now I'm asking our department chair, Dr. Maria Carisma Malinag, to give us the closing message.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Klein, and to all of our dear students for giving us your time, your sharing to us your expertise, and also for allowing us to explore opportunities related to sustainability, especially within the university setting. So when we consider this one, we also look at the context that environmental stewardship, economic resilience, as well as social inclusivity and transparent governance are no longer extracurricular, no, but instead we would want them to be visible in the core curriculum, especially at this current time and hopefully in the future. But then again, we still have so many things to work on. And right now, we would just like to share and this initiative with all of you. So we believe that we have to work together, and we also would have more impact if we have trashed this out together and we have come up with our specific understanding of such matter. So there are a lot of work also that are need to be done, but we are taking this step by step, process by process, and then hopefully we will be able to reach the painting of what we envision the sustainability framework of universities would be. So I would once again want to thank all of my colleagues from the Department of Social Development Services with Dean Jenny as our lead and Dr. Klein as well as Ma'am Tel for the coordinatorships in UME 112. Likewise, I would like to thank our dear staff, Byron, Maeve, who work with us. And also, of course, we would want to thank our students who are here, who remain to be involved and who would want to make a difference. Especially, we would want to thank, of course, our resource speakers. Yes, Ma'am Mirabel May Perez, Professor Maria Emelinda Mendoza, and Vice Chancellor Nathaniel Bantayan for the initiatives and the works and the collaborations that you have extended to all of us. You may want to faculty and colleagues, thank you very much also. And to everyone, may you have a pleasant evening. Bye everyone. Thank you po.